Enjoy your time here and find peace in the stories we tell. If you liked the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. Henry Y and I had been engaged for 10 full years. Yet, due to an unexpected incident, I was forced to hide in a desolate temple all night long with a poor scholar named Felix Gu. The very next day, the Wei family came to call off the engagement, and rumors spread everywhere that I had lost my purity. On the day the Wei family officially came to cancel the marriage, my father, in a fit of rage, delivered a stinging slap that left me dizzy, blood trickling from the corner of my mouth. He shouted, "You unfilial child, why didn't you just die out there?" My stepmother, Madame Joyce Yen, pretended to comfort my father, saying, "Master, please calm down." The eldest miss only wanted to avoid disaster, who could have known she would encounter bandits. But my father remained unappeased. He screamed, "You rebellious daughter, the reputation of my Li family has been stained by someone like you. Men, bring the white silk here. I want to strangle her with my own hands to rectify the family honor." I could only cover my face, tears falling ceaselessly. Since my biological mother passed away, father had elevated her cousin, who was a mere concubine, to the position of legal wife. If my mother had not arranged the marriage with the Wei family while she was alive, I fear my life would have been tormented beyond imagination. The Wei family was a clan favored by the emperor. Ever since Henry's grandfather achieved great merit under the former emperor and sacrificed himself for the country, the clan had risen powerfully. Now, Henry's father held a key position in the court, and Henry himself was truly a dragon among men. At 20, he became the second-place scholar. Although currently only a compiler at the Imperial Academy, everyone knew his future was incredibly bright. Clearly, in just a few months, Henry and I were to be married. However, at that critical moment, when a band of bandits descended from the mountain, I had to flee into a desolate temple to hide for the night. Unexpectedly, before I arrived, a poor scholar named Felix was already inside. Initially, he only intended to rest a little, but due to exhaustion, he had fallen asleep. When I woke up, I realized that in the abandoned temple, there was not only myself and my maid, Lily, but also another person. We hid until dawn, listening to the bandits cheering all night, and only dared to return home after they had returned to the mountain. Felix protected us throughout the night. He held an old lamp stand found in the temple and comforted me, saying, "Do not be afraid, I have this. Even if I cannot stab them to death, I can at least knock them unconscious. You ladies need not worry." His voice sounded light, but I knew he had no certainty. Fortunately, the bandits only stole chickens, ducks, geese, dogs, and some grain from the villagers below the mountain, then retreated in satisfaction. Fearing that Lily and I, being weak females, might encounter mishaps, Felix decided to escort us all the way home. I was trembling, having not slept a wink all night. Hungry and exhausted, my steps unsteady, relying entirely on Lily for support. Lily asked anxiously, "Miss, the carriage and the driver have fled. What shall we do?" I forced a smile to reassure her. "It is fine. We just avoided bandits for one night, it is not a big deal. Father will not blame us." My words were truly naive. Unexpectedly, when the driver returned, he loudly recounted that he and I had become separated. This story quickly spread to the Wei family. The next morning, as soon as I stepped through the door, the Wei family immediately sent people to break off the engagement. The leader was the wet nurse who had watched me grow up, but now her smile was full of distance. She said, "My master understands that the Wei family has always valued etiquette. Daughters of the house never spend the night on the road. The eldest Mrs. situation is truly unfortunate and hard to explain. Our two families are in-laws and do not wish to make things difficult, but we heard a man followed the eldest miss. Such a thing is unacceptable." My father suppressed his anger and reluctantly accepted the Wei family's withdrawal. I hurriedly explained, "Father, the bandits came suddenly." The driver panicked, threw Lily and me off the carriage, and ran away. We had no choice but to find a desolate temple to hide. But my father refused to listen. He immediately raised his hand and slapped me hard, cutting off my explanation. His face was twisted, devoid of his usual kindness. He dragged me into the room and strictly confined me, forbidding me to take half a step outside. He ordered, "Drag Lily out and beat her to death to settle this." Hearing this, Lily knelt in terror, her face pale, kowtowing and begging, "Please, master, spare my life. I can testify that the eldest miss absolutely did nothing to harm the reputation of the Li family, nor did she disrespect the Wei family." Her words were not even finished before she was dragged away. I hugged Lily's legs tightly and screamed, "Father, if you want to beat Lily to death, you might as well kill me first. Lily, tears streaming down her face, choked out through her sobs. Miss, having these words from you. My father looked on coldly, unmoved. My stepmother, Madame Joycey, Jan, advised. Master, making a scene is worse than keeping it quiet. The eldest miss did not damage our honor, why make such a big fuss? Her words seemed to remind my father of something. Furiously, he grabbed a teacup from the table and smashed it directly onto Lily's head. She fell unconscious on the spot. Not long after, servants brought a white silk cloth. Madame Yan immediately stepped aside, her eyes shifty. My father said coldly, "Today I must personally rectify the Li family rules." As soon as he finished speaking, the white silk was wrapped around my neck. I struggled to escape, but my father pulled tighter. My breath grew weaker, and I thought I would not survive. Just then, there was a commotion outside. A loud shout rang out, "Master, bad news. A poor scholar named Felix has suddenly barged in." Holding a brick in his hand, he rushed forward, striking anyone he met, looking reckless as if he did not care for his life. The servants and guards, wary of his status as a scholar, dared not fight him to the death. As a result, he knocked quite a few of them unconscious. Felix rushed straight in and snatched me from my father's hands. I coughed violently, my throat burning and hoarse, only able to lean weakly against his chest, gasping for air. Seeing me in this state, my father became even more furious and immediately ordered, "Drag both my daughter and Felix out and beat them to death." Unexpectedly, Felix stood up straight and spoke coldly. "Master Arthur Lee, you are the Vice Minister of Rights. Do you not know that I, Felix, although just a poor scholar, still hold the title of a licentiate? Do you think killing me will have no consequences?" He continued, his voice challenging. "I forgot to mention, before coming here, I told my classmates that if I did not return after a day and a night, they should immediately beat the drums to report to the imperial court. Consider this, we are all learned men, why must we resort to violence?" Hearing this, my father realized that Felix was not someone easy to deal with. Although he was just a small scholar, the law clearly stated that killing a scholar was more troublesome than killing a commoner. Serious cases could even lead to imprisonment. My father had to suppress his anger. Madame Yan, standing aside, pretended to advise. "Master, calm down. Our eldest miss surely has no private affair with an outsider." Felix sneered. "Madam, no need to pretend to be kind. If you have something to say it directly. Why add fuel to the fire?" Madame Yan choked on his words. As a woman, she could not argue with a man in front of others, so she sat aside resentfully, her face full of displeasure. Felix spoke clearly. "If Master Li believes the eldest miss has lost her reputation, and you can arbitrarily kill her or marry her off to someone else, then let me take responsibility. After all, this started with me. Eldest miss, although I am currently poor, I will try my best to marry you. If you do not despise me, let us choose a good day to get married. I have an elderly mother at home whose health is still good. Although I am just a scholar, who knows, I might become a provincial graduate in the future." His gentle words made me smile involuntarily. Compared to the heartlessness of the Wei family, Felix, though blameless, showed far more courage and responsibility. Although I had no feelings for him, I nodded frankly. "If you do not despise me as someone who has been rejected." The smile on Felix's face became even more radiant. My father, Master Lai, looked even worse upon seeing this. Felix laughed softly, his tone calm but sarcastic. "Oh, that is not right. Father-in-law, marrying her to someone else is not as good as marrying her to me. What do you think?" My father was cornered and finally had to agree to the marriage with Felix. Although my father had 100 ways to force him to leave, against Felix's stubborn and shameless character, all efforts were futile. Felix bluntly threatened, "If I am driven away, I will tell everyone that Master Li forced his own daughter to death." My father, who valued face more than anything, had to choose the solution of marrying me to Felix. He immediately reduced the dowry originally prepared for my marriage to the Wei family, he said. "The Wei family did not blame us. We decided to switch brides and marry your sister, Helen Li, into their family. The Wei family is prestigious, while you are only marrying a poor scholar. Bringing a large dowry would be a waste. It is better to leave most of it for your sister." His words sounded reasonable, but the truth was clear, it was all for my sister. My heart felt like it had a large wound, cold winds blowing through it. I could no longer hold back and retorted, "Father, there is no need to pretend. The dowry was left by my mother. When Madame Yan was a concubine, she could not even support herself, let alone compete. Now that she is the legal wife, she covets my dowry. Is it because she knows I have no one to rely on?" My father, his intentions exposed, shouted in embarrassment. Evelyn Lee, that is your stepmother and sister. How can you say such things? I smiled faintly, bitterness in my heart. My biological mother's spirit tablet is still in the Lee family ancestral hall. As for my sister, if father lets her acknowledge my mother as her mother and call Madame Yan auntie, then I am willing to give up half the dowry. My father naturally did not accept my request. A few days later, I heard the warehouse caught fire, damaging many items. Tired of his tricks, I wrote a letter asking Felix for help. Since Lily was beaten to death in my father's eyes, I had no one to trust, so I had to hide silver and fake a love letter to send the message out. Not long after, Felix boldly came to the house, declaring he wanted to see the dowry list. My father was furious, but Felix calmly replied, "Father-in-law, you know my family is poor. Do we not rely on my wife's dowry to live? I must check beforehand to avoid any shortages." Using that opportunity, I escaped confinement. When viewing the dowry list, I discovered many missing items. I pointed them out one by one, making my father's face darken. But I was not afraid and continued listing every deficiency. My father must have wanted to kill me right there. But I did not give him the chance. I said calmly, "Father, I do not demand the items back. Just convert them into silver and pay me. My husband's family is poor. We would rather hold silver than receive those objects. For the missing items, convert them to silver at market price." Felix and I smiled at each other, feeling no shame in our poverty. Felix extended his hand toward my father and said half-jokingly, "Father-in-law, you do not want me to talk nonsense outside, do you? The young Mrs.'s reputation is important. But if people know a father swallowed his daughter's dowry, that would be much worse." Gritting his teeth, my father finally had to go to the accounting room and retrieve 2,000 silver taels to give to me. The betrothal gifts left by my mother were mostly antiques and precious calligraphy passed down from my maternal grandfather. Their value could not be measured by a few thousand taels of silver, but to save face for Helen, father and Joyce Yun truly did not hesitate to sacrifice them. However, I no longer troubled myself with those things. They were no longer important. What mattered more was that I must live a new life, free and happy. On the day I was to leave, Helen, following custom, came to add to my dowry, giving me a set of pure gold jewelry. But the gold was only a thin layer on the outside. It looked flashy but was actually worthless. I did not even bother to pay attention to her. Since childhood, this younger sister had used enough tricks to compete for father's affection. From gatherings with relatives to a small piece of cake I ate extra, she always found a way to take a share for herself. She cried skillfully, not overdoing it, but enough to make father love and cherish her even more, like a precious jewel. Now, as usual, she pretended to sob, "Elder sister, we are going our separate ways. I do not know how many times we will be able to reunite in the future." Her tears fell profusely, her expression seeming as if she truly did not want to part with me. I only glanced at her indifferently and spoke coldly. "It is fine. You are marrying my former fiancé. If you do not mind, at any time, I can come to the Wei family to visit you. After all, the Gu family is poor and does not have many rules forbidding me from leaving the house." I saw her wipe her tears, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. I added a sentence full of hidden meaning. "After all, I am very familiar with the Wei family." Immediately, she stopped crying, her face turning pale. Before this, Henry had sent me a letter saying that family orders could not be defied. Everything was decided by his parents, and he could not disobey. At the end of the letter, he even wrote, "Evelyn, you are always in my heart." Reading that, I only found it ridiculous and replied immediately, "On the day I marry, just send a generous gift. That would be better than anything else." After receiving my reply, Henry finally dared not complain anymore. Helen wiped her tears dry and immediately changed her expression, speaking sarcastically. "Elder sister, marrying from a grand entrance into a poor family, you will probably find it hard to get used to. Right, the house is small and cramped, with no servants, no wet nurse to serve. Thinking about your Jade, like hands having to work hard from now on makes me pity you." I was not annoyed at all, on the contrary. I replied calmly, "It is fine. After all, I also got 2,000 silver taels from father. Perhaps it is enough to live on." Sure enough, as soon as money was mentioned, the faces of Helen and Madame Yan immediately changed, showing their displeasure. To them, that silver was not mine but theirs, or more precisely, the inheritance prepared for Simon Lee, my father's only son. Helen glared at me, twisting her handkerchief several times in her hands, then bluntly scolded, "Since when did you become such a greedy person? You must know that in this house, only brother Simon is a son, Everything must be left for him. I kept a calm expression, speaking neither fast nor slow. In that case, let your mother return all of my dowry. I will leave these 2,000 silver taels behind and not take them. Helen suddenly became tongue-tied, unable to say a word. Compared to silver, what she cared about more was a rich dowry, something that could give her face when entering her husband's family. Helen was like Father and Madame Yan, liking to show off luxury but lacking the actual resources. What Father could give her was merely a few plots of land and shops belonging to the Li family, which could not completely belong to her because the house still had Simon, the only male heir and true successor. Moreover, Madame Yan's clan had long declined to the point of relying on the Li family. How could they gather assets for her dowry? Helen understood clearly that I had seen through everything, so she could only remain silent, daring not to argue further. Helen said no more, coldly ending the meeting between sisters. Afterward, I married Felix. He had many classmates, so on the wedding day, he brought a large group to pick up the bride, making the scene unusually lively. On that day, although my father was marrying off a daughter, he looked as if he had just lost a child. His face was dark, seemingly dripping with water. Felix, thoughtful, found an excuse for him, telling outsiders that father was heartbroken because he was marrying his daughter to a poor scholar like him. He even joked that being able to marry Evelyn was truly a blessing from his ancestors. Father only gave a faint smile and reluctantly saw me out the door. The Gu family did not have a large house, just a small 3-room tiled cottage. My mother-in-law, fearing I would despise poverty, intentionally gave up the main room for me to stay in, while she moved to the east room. That day, my mother-in-law dressed neatly, her face full of pride as she boasted to everyone. My daughter-in-law is truly extraordinary. Her maternal grandfather was the head of the academy. Do you know what a head of the academy is? He was a learned man, proficient in both astronomy and geography. I originally thought she would look down on someone who had been rejected, like me. Unexpectedly, she was so generous and easygoing. After the ceremony, I was taken to the bridal chamber. Felix lifted the veil, and the lively atmosphere suddenly quieted down. Suddenly, someone blurted out, "Oh my, isn't she a fairy descended from Earth?" The remark made me blush with embarrassment. Felix smiled, eyes narrowing, turned his head, and shouted, "Hey! Who allowed you to talk to your sister-in-law like that?" The whole room burst into laughter again. Afterward, he was dragged out by everyone to drink. Before leaving, he turned back, winked at me, and said, "I have prepared a surprise for you." When everyone had left, I saw a limping figure enter. As I focused my eyes, my vision immediately blurred with tears. That person was none other than Lily. She cried sobbing, kneeling before me. "Miss, my life is tough. I haven't died yet, only crippled a leg. You won't despise me, will you?" I didn't care that today was a big happy day, laughing and crying at the same time. I punched her lightly on the shoulder. "You silly girl. I thought you were dead. I cried for you for months, even sent money to your foster mother, torturing myself until I couldn't eat or sleep well. Yet you quietly hid in the Gu family's house and kept it from me." Only then did Lily explain the whole story. It turned out Felix was truly a remarkable person. Using the excuse that he was the future son-in-law of the Li family, he told people to bring Lily, who was beaten near death at that time, to the Gu family. Here, he treated her wounds and even killed chickens to nourish her. My mother-in-law had raised a whole flock of chickens, which eventually were all eaten by Lily. Mentioning this, Lily felt a bit ashamed. I held her hand, comforting her gently. "It was my fault, I implicated you. What are a few chickens worth? Now your mistress has silver. If we want to buy chickens, we can buy as many as we want. Tomorrow, you just take the silver and buy to your heart's content." On the wedding night, Felix drank a few cups of wine, staggered as he looked at me, and said, "I know you didn't truly want to marry me. Actually, if not for fate pushing us, I also didn't intend to marry so early. But rest assured, I will not touch you. I am a man of integrity, still a pure scholar until now." He laughed awkwardly when he saw me chuckle, then continued seriously, "I speak the truth. First, I want to achieve academic honors so you can be my wife gloriously, be honored by the emperor. Oh, by the way, you have married me later. Even if you meet someone suitable, you are not allowed to run away, okay? If you do, you must discuss it with me reasonably before thinking about remarrying." He kept babbling incoherently until Lily and I had to combine our strength to get him onto the bed. Watching him sleep soundly, his face completely defenseless, my heart suddenly softened, feeling both amused and warm. I was also tired and drifted into sleep. The next day, I woke up early, intending to pay respects to my mother-in-law. Unexpectedly, she was still sleeping. Seeing me, she lazily opened her eyes and said, "Daughter-in-law, waking up so early, are you planning to go down to the fields to work? Our family has no work for you to do. Go back and sleep more." I intended to offer tea according to custom, but my mother-in-law did not follow the rules, which confused me a bit. Lily, who had lived with the Goof family for a while, laughed. "Miss, let's go back. The young master is still sleeping. The old madam is used to waking up late, she only gets out of bed when the sun is high." Hearing Lily speak, I understood that the personalities of my mother-in-law and Felix were naturally unpretentious. Returning to the room, Felix was still sleeping soundly. I was no longer sleepy, so I took out my embroidery frame to work. Afterward, I gave silver to Lily, asking her to buy some chickens, ducks, and geese. In less than an hour, the whole yard was bustling with the sounds of poultry. My mother-in-law woke up, saw the yard full of chickens, ducks, and geese, and was overjoyed. Holding my hand and laughing radiantly, "I didn't expect my daughter-in-law to be the god of wealth arriving at our home. But listen, child, my son has no ability and cannot give you a good life, yet I have to let you use your dowry to buy these things. I feel truly guilty." After speaking, she suddenly got in the mood and caught 2 chickens from the old flock to make a nourishing meal for me. Felix didn't wake up until nearly noon. He didn't remember much of what he said last night, but when he opened his eyes and saw me, he was stunned and blurted out a cry. I bit my lip, daring not to look straight at him, while he blushed, lowered his head, and put on his clothes hurriedly. Breakfast had been prepared by Lily and me long ago, but because both my mother-in-law and Felix slept late, it eventually became lunch. I could only smile watching them, feeling this new life was a bit strange but also truly close and warm. My mother-in-law killed a chicken to make soup, and roasted the other one. During the meal, Felix picked up a chicken leg and placed it in my bowl, laughing. "You married me, there are no delicacies from the mountains or seas. I can only let you eat a chicken leg." I lowered my head to eat the chicken, feeling truly content. After the meal, I intended to wash the dishes, but my mother-in-law waved her hand to push me away. "Daughter-in-law, housework doesn't need you to do. These hands, like Felix, are for writing, not for labor. Go back to your room and rest." After saying that, she chased me back to the room. I returned to the room and found Felix holding a pen, looking pensive, not knowing what he was thinking. I asked softly, "Husband, what are you thinking about?" He looked up at me, his eyes lighting up, then said, "I am thinking about trying to write a script for the theater. I want to take the theme of women's virtue. Would you mind if I used your own story as the basis for the script?" His words surprised me. I felt it was somewhat inappropriate but also sensed some logic in his intention. I replied, "If you want to write, then write, but don't reveal too many details to avoid my father knowing and causing you trouble." Felix smiled, his eyes gentle. "I am not afraid of father-in-law finding trouble, I only fear you being unhappy in your heart. This society always forces women to follow the 3 obediences and 4 virtues but despises their lives. Just to stay alive, women have to suffer rejection, even being forced to commit suicide. I find these laws too harsh," he continued, his voice full of emotion. "Men can freely visit brothels, and are considered romantic and elegant, while women only need to talk a lot with men to be considered immoral and spat upon by the world. Even the emperor married a widow as the empress, and no one dared to criticize. Ultimately it is all because women have no power in their hands." Felix began to write a play. Watching him, a feeling of warmth and pride surged in my heart. Felix named the play Falling Pear Blossoms, sounding both elegant and profound. The content told of a girl from a noble family who, to save her life, had to hide with a strange man for a night. Afterward, both were completely innocent. Villains spread rumors and falsely accused them of having an illicit relationship. To preserve the family's honor, the girl chose to hang herself. After death, her unjust soul could not transcend and wandered the human world forever. She helped oppressed women save their lives from honor-based deaths. If she discovers anyone spreading malicious rumors, she turns into a vengeful spirit to haunt them in the middle of the night. Because she was buried under a pear tree, every time pear blossoms bloomed, those she had saved voluntarily came to pick up the fallen petals to prevent them from being trampled. Later, thanks to the merit of saving people, she was transformed by the Bodhisattva into the pear blossom fairy, symbolizing the purity of women. Though pure and noble, one need not stubbornly follow blind ethics because life is always more important than reputation. In the play, the Pear Blossom Fairy sang, "Since ancient times, women have suffered many hardships. If life is not worth as much as reputation, then why give birth to daughters in this world?" The sorrowful lyrics brought countless audience members to tears. The play was performed for several days, receiving much praise and causing a great stir in the capital. Some people even mentioned the event of the Wei family breaking off the engagement because a girl had to take shelter overnight to save her life, causing the Wei family to be swept into a vortex of harsh public opinion. My father also dared not raise his head to look at anyone because people gossiped that he only valued external etiquette, but abandoned his own daughter's life. Fortunately, the play was not banned. Even Her Majesty in the palace personally requested to watch the play, then continuously praised it, protecting the performance from schemers and simultaneously issuing an order allowing Falling Pear Blossoms to be officially performed. Since then, it became a work celebrated throughout the capital. Thanks to the play Falling Pear Blossoms, Felix earned a decent amount of silver. Immediately after, he bought 2 sturdy maids and smiled at me, saying, "I cannot let you, a young lady who has never touched water, have to wash clothes and cook immediately." As soon as he finished speaking, my mother-in-law glared sharply. "If she hadn't agreed to let you write the play, how would our family have silver to spend?" Although my mother-in-law scolded him verbally, she wasn't angry at all. She continued resentfully, "Your father-in-law is the one to blame. Is a daughter's life more important, or is honor more important? Truly an unreasonable person." The mother and son just like that criticized my father together for half an hour, until their throats were dry and they had to drink more than half a pot of tea to soothe them. The days living in the Gu family were not wealthy but free and happy. I could sleep comfortably without worrying about anything. Felix never urged me, and neither did my mother-in-law. Such an easy life was something I had never had in the Li family for so many years. Lily and the 2 newly bought maids took care of the house, sweeping the yard neatly and cleanly. When I woke up, the chickens, ducks, and geese had eaten their fill and leisurely led each other down to the pond to swim. Felix rarely got up early, but today he also made an effort to get out of bed. Recently, he had been extremely busy. After the play became famous, theater troupes from everywhere sought him out, inviting him to write scripts. He refused them all, using the excuse, "My wife manages strictly and doesn't let me go out much." Outsiders laughed at him for being a henpecked husband, but he didn't care. Returning home, he held my hand and laughed. "I must try to pass the scholar exam. I dare not dream of being the top scholar, but becoming a provincial graduate is worth a try. At least I must make you proud." My mother-in-law beside him added, "That's right, you must bring honor to your wife." Felix smiled, holding my hand tightly, his eyes filled with faith. "I will definitely bring glory to you, especially when the Wei family is about to hold a wedding with Helen. I don't want you to be mocked by others or feel unfair." Actually, I didn't feel unfair at all. Since marrying Felix, I truly understood what a peaceful life was. I didn't need to worry about being criticized by my husband's family, didn't fear not caring for Henry perfectly, and didn't mind the relationship with my sister-in-law. Although relatives of the Gu family sometimes gossiped, claiming I was a rejected woman, my mother-in-law was not someone to be trifled with. She led the 2 sturdy maids, and whenever anyone dared to badmouth me, she immediately went to their house to argue. The village chief had to step in to mediate many times, but eventually got a headache from my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law had a talent for crying like a god. She cried about her husband dying early, cried to the Gu ancestors, and cried about being bullied by relatives. As a result, everyone couldn't stand it and had to give in. Every time she finished arguing, she went home to eat and drink to her heart's content to regain her strength, then turned to urge her son. "You must pass the provincial graduate exam to open their eyes." Felix said helplessly, "Mother, before, you said I only needed to pass the scholar exam to be exempt from taxes and not be bullied by others. You said as long as we didn't worry about food and drink, it was enough." My mother-in-law heard this, glanced at me, then forced a smile and pinched her son's arm. "Are you stupid? Back then, I intended for you to marry the butcher's daughter. At least we wouldn't worry about a lack of meat. Who would have thought you would marry a noble young lady like this? Now, shouldn't you make your wife proud a little, so that when she visits her maiden home, she won't have to endure your father-in-law's contemptuous looks?" Hearing this, I burst out laughing, feeling that the mother and son of the Gu family were truly much more lovable than the hypocrisy and coldness of the Wei family. Thinking back, if I were forced to return and marry Henry, I fear I could never do it. Lily also couldn't help but praise. Miss, the young master and the old madam are truly rare people. The young master is unlike ordinary scholars, he doesn't have their arrogance or dryness. The old madam of the Gu family is truly lovable. She doesn't put on airs to suppress others, nor does she use authority to bully her daughter-in-law. Therefore, during the days living in the Gu family, I felt like a fish in water. At night, Felix held my hand lying on the bed. From poetry and songs to life philosophy, everything could be discussed. He suddenly asked, "Wife, do you want to know what the greatest philosophy of life is?" I turned to face him under the moonlight, smiling as I looked at him and replied, "If you want to know, I am also willing to explore with you." Hearing this, Felix smiled radiantly, but his voice trembled. "Wife, I am just a poor, humble scholar. Do you not regret it?" I replied gently. "My husband has a demeanor and responsibility worth more than 10,000 taels of gold. If I do not cherish such a husband, that is what I would have to regret." Hearing my words, Felix seemed to gain strength, his eyes shining as he hugged me tightly. That night, under the starlight, we truly bonded with each other. Since officially becoming husband and wife, Felix seemed to want to stick to me all the time. Wherever I went, he insisted on going along. Once, I followed my mother-in-law to the river to wash clothes to experience life. He also took a book and sat nearby reading. The girls in the village saw this, and couldn't help laughing and teasing. "Scholar Gu, why are you clinging to your wife's skirt like this?" He didn't hesitate to retort. "I like being next to my wife. You don't have men by your side, but my wife does." That sentence made everyone grab their washing clubs to chase him, creating a scene both funny and lively. Although village life was not wealthy, it was full of joy. Even washing clothes became interesting. Previously, I only knew that dirty clothes would be washed by someone, but now my mother-in-law personally taught me how to do it. When I became proficient, she wouldn't let me touch it anymore. "You are about to be a provincial graduate's wife, knowing is enough. Leave these tasks for others to worry about." My mother-in-law was indeed a person with a unique style, unlike what people usually discussed. I couldn't resist her will, so I had to go sit next to Felix. Meanwhile, in the water, our flock of ducks and geese were swimming, creating a peaceful, pastoral scene. I couldn't help but sigh with emotion. What a beautiful village life. Felix also smiled and replied, "My mother is not like the traditional model. When I was small, she didn't force me to wake up early or suffer to study. She said passing the scholar exam to be tax-exempt and not bullied by people was enough. Climbing too high is tiring. Living peacefully with enough to eat and wear is good." Hearing him speak, I remembered my biological mother. My mother was very traditional, always teaching me to be a proper noble young lady. Speech, gestures, and actions all had to be standard so outsiders wouldn't say she didn't know how to teach her child. Therefore, Felix often told me, "If you're tired, sit. If sitting is tiring, lie down. Why make yourself suffer?" But I knew noble families were always like that. A wrong word or action from me would not only affect myself but also cause the whole family to be gossiped about. The fact that I was rejected by the Wei family was a clear example. It wasn't my fault, but people criticized me, claiming I lost face for the whole family, causing the reputations of other girls in the house to be affected as well. At that time, I only thought perhaps dying on my own doorstep was the best way to atone. Fortunately, all those things had now become the past. After the play Falling Pear Blossoms was released, two streams of opinion erupted among the noble young ladies in the capital. One side argued that virtue was most important, while the other placed life above all else. But those debates no longer had anything to do with me. The examination was approaching. Felix, aiming to become a provincial graduate, studied diligently every day, completely different from his previous indifferent appearance. We lived harmoniously and happily together. At this time, I was calculating what else to prepare to make our life even more fulfilling. I once thought about whether, with the money I had, I could buy a large house to live in, but Felix firmly said, "That is your dowry, it is not allowed to be squandered. Any man without ability who looks at a woman's dowry is truly shameful. You married me, so food and clothing must be provided by me, there is no reason to let you spend money on purchases." Seeing him so determined, I gave up the thought. A few days later, my mother-in-law and two maids walked around the village chatting happily. When she returned, she was holding a girl about 13 or 14 years old whose hand had been chopped off. The child lay limply in the maid's arms, her face pale and bloodless. My mother-in-law said worriedly, "Nina, Her grandfather has gone mad. I hurriedly asked for the details and learned that Nina was the granddaughter of an old scholar in the village. She accidentally fell into the water and was pulled up by a man in the village. Just for that, the old scholar believed his granddaughter had lost her purity. In a fit of madness, he took a kitchen knife and chopped off the child's hand. She fainted from pain, but he didn't even allow anyone to treat her. My mother-in-law ignored those crazy reasons and immediately ordered the maid to carry Nina home. Looking at the girl lying motionless, breathing weakly, eyes closed as if lifeless, I suddenly felt a fierce anger rising. What law? What reputation? She was only 14 years old, just being pulled by the hand a little. Did she have to suffer this? Should she have been left to die? I was shaking with anger, a pang of sorrow rising in my heart as if I were suffering the pain myself. Tears gushed out uncontrollably. I immediately ordered someone to fetch the best doctor to save her. When Nina gradually woke up and saw her end was lost, her eyes were empty, not a tear fell. She was like a torn doll, drained of all vitality, just lying there staring blankly at the ceiling. The doctor said she had likely suffered severe psychological trauma. Hearing this, my heart tightened even more. The doctor said Nina needed to take sedatives for a few days to stabilize her spirit. Meanwhile, the old scholar, Nina's grandfather, came to our house demanding the person. Felix did not stand on ceremony and bluntly chased him away. You are a scholar, I am also a scholar. Our status is the same. You are just older, but even more unreasonable. If we hand Nina back to you, it is no different from sending her to death. My wife has decided, you don't need this child, so we will raise her. Although the old scholar was old, he couldn't match Felix's youthful strength. He was chased until he ran everywhere, losing all face in the village. The old scholar always acted arrogant, giving himself the right to direct everything in the family. He was also a man of empty words, both harsh and selfish. Although he knew nothing but reading books, he still forced his family to serve him, from old to young. Since she was small, Nina had to shoulder washing and cooking in the house, while her male cousins didn't have to lift a finger. Nina wasn't even given a name at birth. She was just called second girl, Nina. When Nina's mother secretly came to visit, she only dared to cry silently, giving the child a few copper coins, then covering her face and running back. She also didn't dare to take her child away because her husband, a useless man with no voice in the house, didn't have the courage to oppose the old scholar's orders. He had declared that Nina was not allowed to return home. Since Nina came to our house, I constantly pondered one thing: are rituals and laws truly more important than human life? Felix noticed I was tossing and turning at night and suggested, "Wife, you can open a class to teach reading to women in the village. When they know more, they will understand that human life is always nobler than any ritual or rule." With his support, I put aside my lazy habits and started planning to open a literacy class. But this was not easy. The first person to object was the old scholar. He relied on his age and reputation to drag a group of conservative men to oppose me. Fortunately, Nina and the two maids in the house stood by my side. They not only helped me with work but also bravely stood up to explain the injustices they had suffered. Thanks to that, my words were gradually listened to in the village. Additionally, my mother-in-law followed me to learn to read, which soon attracted other girls in the village. But the old scholar couldn't stand it and led people to the front of the Gu family's house to drive me away. I truly couldn't stand his madness anymore, so I borrowed the tiger's might to scare the fox, using my father's identity as a shield. You are just an old scholar, while my father is the vice minister of rights. Logically, if my father doesn't object, what right do you have to object? Actually, my father knows nothing about this, but using it to scare people is enough. You keep talking about laws and principles. If Nina had died, would you be satisfied? I ask you, if your mother were alive and in danger, and a man saved her, would you force her to hang herself? If your daughter-in-law were in danger and a man saved her, would you also force her to hang herself? In other words, in the future, if men see women in danger, they will all stand by and watch. Just give it 10 days, who will dare to go out on the street? Women will all stay indoors with doors closed tight. The streets will be full of only men. Then why do you need to marry and have children? You might as well marry a man. My words left the old scholar speechless. His mouth hung open, empty, his eyes dull like dead fish eyes. His wrinkled, aged face looked like a withered orange peel, standing before the door looking no different from a worn, out weeping statue. Although Nina lost an arm, she was very hardworking. She learned how to dress and write with only one hand, and could even eat without anyone's help. When she saw her grandfather, she was no longer afraid as before but became cold, looking at him like a stranger she had never known. Elder sister, later I want to be like you. I will learn more knowledge to teach other girls, teaching them not to live forever in the backyard, not to be dependent on anyone. Looking at Nina now, I no longer saw the shadow of the sad, weak little girl from before. In front of me, she had changed, becoming stronger and more determined, like a small flame burning bright in the dark night. Nina was not only fearless but also extremely enthusiastic, which made me feel more at ease. Felix, afraid I would work too hard, occasionally came to the class when he was free to teach knowledge that ordinary girls rarely had the chance to access. Gradually, not only women in the village but also people from other villages came to learn. Most of them were innocent young girls who did not understand the ways of the world. Because they did not have enough money to buy paper and brushes, they used tree branches to write and draw on the ground. Some learned a few words before being forced back by their families, but others continued to learn and passed it on to girls who could not attend class. Eventually, even young boys were sent to study. Most of their parents were illiterate farmers. They thought that since I taught for free, if their children learned to read, they could later go to the city to work as accountants or apprentices. Even as apprentices, being literate was better than being illiterate. Therefore, the Gu family's courtyard gradually became overcrowded, and I had to spend money to buy another piece of land to expand the classroom. Nina and Lily were my right and left hands. Both had suffered injuries to preserve their chastity. One lost an arm, the other crippled a leg. They were the strongest proof that in this world, only by surviving is there hope. So-called chastity compared to human life is truly insignificant. My literacy school developed more and more, its reputation spreading across 10 miles and 8 villages. Before long, my father also heard the news. Using the excuse of wanting to add to Helen's dowry, he called me back. Initially, I did not intend to return, but Felix advised that no matter what, I should fulfill the rites, otherwise, if word got out, the world would say I was unfilial. Felix returned with me. He hired an ox cart filled with brand new books and items like chickens, ducks and geese gifted by the villagers. Everything was thoughtful, leaving no excuse for anyone to find fault. However, as soon as I stepped through the door, my father showed a gloomy face and said nothing. He raised his hand and slapped me, making me dizzy, my vision going dark. He shouted, "You dare! You are becoming more and more shameless, lawless." I held my face, tears welling up. Amidst his ceaseless scolding, I finally understood the reason for his rage. It turned out to be because of my literacy school. In my father's eyes, I should not show my face to teach, let alone accept men into the class. According to him, I should lock myself in the house, having no face to step outside, because I was a woman who had been rejected. I should know what shame was. Yet my mother-in-law did not object and Felix did not object, but the father who never cared about me jumped out to object. I held my face, tears falling like rain, my heart feeling pierced by 1,000 knives. From childhood to adulthood, Father had always been strict with me, demanding I behave according to the standards of a noble young lady. Eating, dressing, gestures, speech, everything had to follow rules. But my younger sister was different. She was not bound by any rules. She could act spoiled and charming in our parents' laps, while I had to keep my distance and not touch anything randomly. She could choose food, jewelry, and clothes as she liked, but I could not because I had to understand what propriety was. I choked out, "Father, for so many years, you never gave me even a little love. Now you jump out to criticize me, saying I must do this, cannot do that. But for what reason? For what reason?" My father was so angry he stepped back a few paces, slammed his hand on the table, and shouted. Just at this tense moment of irreconcilable conflict, servants rushed in from outside, gasping for breath. "Master, come out quickly. The madam just fell into the water and was carried ashore by the son-in-law. Now it is causing a huge commotion." Hearing their words, I no longer had the mind to cry, only seeing my head filled with unanswered questions. I did not know what madness Felix was up to now. Why was he entangled with Madame Yan like that? Father and I rushed toward the lotus pond, almost running. When we arrived, the scene before us was Felix with disheveled clothes, his hand pulling Madame Yan, who was soaked through, her clothes clinging to her body. Both of their mouths were arguing ceaselessly. That scene made both father's and my faces turn dark. Felix shouted loudly, "It has come to this, I have also touched you, and you have also lost your chastity. to have an explanation for father-in-law here. I have a belt ready, but I see this tree branch isn't bad either. Mother-in-law, with your slender figure, surely it can hang you. My father shouted angrily. You rebellious son. What are you doing acting recklessly? But upon seeing us, Felix was not only unafraid but also smiled broadly. His usually scholarly face now had a bit of cunning, as if he had just executed a great scheme. He laughed loudly. Mother-in-law fell into the water. I hugged her and carried her. Clearly mother-in-law is no longer pure. Father-in-law cannot pretend not to see anything in front of everyone. Or perhaps you should quickly write a divorce letter so she can hang herself. Those words made Madame Yan burst into tears, trembling and crying out. You are truly too much. Master, please do not listen to his nonsense. My father's face was pale, angered by the scene before him until his lips trembled. He tried to speak but could only stammer a few sounds, not knowing how to refute. At that moment, Felix turned to me and winked. I understood that he was intentionally standing up to vent anger for me. However, his method was truly too arrogant, leaving me not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Madame Yan seemed to also realize the awkward situation falling upon her head, bewildered and not knowing what to do. Felix spoke again, his tone full of mockery. In the past, when mother-in-law forced my wife, she felt it was irrelevant. Now what? And father-in-law, you usually preach about morality, etiquette, and shame. Have you forgotten it all now? I hugged and carried my mother-in-law. You tell me, should I leave now, or must mother-in-law pack up and get out for me? My father shouted loudly, chasing Felix and me out of the house. Sitting on the ox cart, Felix hugged me, comforting me gently. They are truly too much, bullying you. I saw it all, he even hit you. But I couldn't be harsh with my father-in-law, so I could only sneak to the back courtyard to cause such a disturbance to make him mad. Lying in his arms, for the first time, I felt the sensation of being protected. My heart felt both warm and bittersweet. On the day Helen got married, as her elder sister, I originally did not want to return, but blood ties with the Lee family could not be denied or avoided. Although my father completely detested me, I still had to suppress my discomfort and return. He called both Felix and me home. Since the time she was humiliated by Felix, Madame Yan tried to avoid him every time she saw him, her face full of fear. Others might fear etiquette and shame, but Felix did not care about those things. Right at the time of the wedding between Helen and Henry, Felix had just completed the provincial examination. Although he hadn't had time to rest, he took me to the Lee family without delay. As soon as my father saw the face of this unhappy son-in-law, he couldn't hide his disgust. His features seemed twisted, nose not like a nose, eyes not like eyes. But Felix didn't mind. He happily pulled relatives out to chat and discuss lively topics. Meanwhile, I was in Helen's room, watching her wearing a bright red wedding dress, her face shyly waiting for Henry to pick up the bride. Yet she still dared to smile and ask, "Older sister, you aren't jealous, are you?" I had learned from Felix that in this world, knowing how to be shameless helps one be unmatched. I clapped my hands, replying calmly, "If you feel uneasy, I will immediately go back and negotiate with your brother-in-law so that you and I can marry into the Wei family together." As soon as the words were spoken, let alone Helen, even I felt it was incredibly humorous. The other female relatives in the room widened their eyes and dropped their jaws looking at each other. No one could utter a word. The room became silent as a tomb. Seeing the heavy atmosphere, I burst out laughing, looking at everyone scared pale, and said, "Wasn't I just trying to comfort my younger sister? She worries every day that I am not happy. Don't I want to let her see that my heart is at ease and unconcerned? Although my husband is just a scholar, he is someone who loves and protects me for life. I hate irresponsible men with no will the most. Therefore, sister, don't be afraid. I truly do not care about Henry. Just rest assured and get married." These words left Helen not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Fortunately, Henry arrived very quickly. Someone in front reported that Felix posed a riddle that stumped Henry. A group of noble young masters couldn't solve it either. Afterward, Felix played enough before generously letting them in to pick up the bride. I curiously asked Felix what the riddle was and why so many well-read young masters couldn't answer it. He replied solemnly, "I asked how many days does it take to harvest rice, how many days for beans to ripen. Then I asked in which season to pick fresh vegetables and fruits." That group of people was instantly stunned. I was caught between laughter and tears looking at him, thinking I should also thank him for coming up with such odd questions. Fortunately, Henry today wore the bright red groom's ceremonial robes, truly a handsome and extraordinary young man. I watched him lead Helen out, my heart holding not a bit of sadness or pain. Felix beside me hinted. Looking at Henry, he is indeed an outstanding talent. I pinched his hand, laughing. What use is an outstanding talent? I only love that responsible and thick-skinned person over there. Hearing that, Felix breathed a sigh of relief. Seeing my sister off, outsiders gossiped, merely because the Wei family had talent and prospects that made people admire them. Unlike me, the person I married was just a scholar. Until now, before I could even justify Felix with a few words, the sound of firecrackers rang out outside. Helen was crying as if this were an indispensable skill on the wedding day. She had to cry in front of her parents to show sincere affection and express unfilial piety, because from now on she would be a woman of another family. She was crying halfway through when she was interrupted by the sound of firecrackers. Everyone curiously asked around, and the more they asked, the more surprised they were. It turned out that the day Helen got married coincided exactly with the announcement of the Golden List. Those who came to congratulate me ran to my mother-in-law's house to report the good news. Hearing that Felix was at the Lee family's house, they hurriedly turned back to announce the joy. It turned out Felix had just passed the provincial examination and even ranked first as the top scholar. For a moment, congratulations rang out endlessly. Although my father previously hated Felix extremely, now his face also revealed some joy. After all, that was his son-in-law. In contrast, Henry's face was not very pleasant. With Felix becoming the top scholar, the happiest person turned out to be my father. He completely changed his attitude, no longer looking annoyed or having a headache whenever he saw him. He even intimately called him virtuous son-in-law. Furthermore, even I, the daughter he once coldly neglected, received some goodwill from him. Fortunately, Felix still had to return home and didn't have time to deal with my father. My father generously took out all the carriages in the house and told us to use them to return. On the carriage, Felix exclaimed. Truly, when a person achieves enlightenment, even their chickens and dogs ascend to heaven. Before, when I was just a scholar, father-in-law didn't even bother to look at me. Now that I've become the top scholar, my father-in-law gifted me a whole carriage, making me unable to adapt yet. When we arrived home, the driver prepared to take the carriage back. Felix immediately asked in surprise, "Isn't this the gift father-in-law gave me?" The driver heard this, his face immediately becoming awkward as if suffering a severe stomach ache. With no other choice, he had to force a smile and hire an ox cart to return. Felix, with a face full of smiles, said, "See, father-in-law still loves you. Knowing your husband passed as a provincial graduate, he specially gifted a whole horse carriage to you." I thought to myself, was that his gift? Clearly you were thick-skinned enough to demand it. However, the Gu family courtyard was now crowded with people coming to congratulate, so I couldn't expose him in front of everyone. My mother-in-law was so happy she wiped her tears ceaselessly. Around her, everyone respectfully called her old madam, making her radiant like a flower blooming in the sun. But upon meeting her son, she felt sad. "Son, in the future, will you still be able to sleep until the sun is high?" It turned out she was worried that her son would no longer be able to lazily sleep in, and consequently, she would also have to wake up early. Facing the strange concerns of this mother and son, I could only choose silence. A bustling day passed. Felix lay sluggishly on the bed, his whole body exhausted. He wrapped his arms around me, whispering hoarsely, "You've worked hard." We hugged each other without saying a word, and soon drifted into sleep. However, Felix still had to be busy receiving guests. He even rode my father's carriage everywhere to show off, telling everyone it was a gift from his father-in-law. Meanwhile, I continued my work of teaching literacy to everyone. At night, he brought me a white jade hairpin carved in the shape of a small, exquisite magnolia flower. He smelled faintly of wine. Evidently, he had just returned from a party. After becoming a provincial graduate, he had many meetings he couldn't refuse, especially being the son-in-law of the Vice Minister of Rights. The number of people coming to flatter him increased, so he had to drink a few cups. He pressed his face close to mine, rubbing it a few times, his voice sounding both joking and serious. "Wife, marrying me was a lowering of your status. I must try hard to be worthy of you. I cannot let people laugh at you, and certainly cannot let Henry keep missing you. You are so beautiful and gentle. I do not allow Henry to think of you anymore." I felt both amused and helpless, hugging him and coaxing him to drink a bowl of hangover soup. Then I asked Lily to prepare hot water for him to wash his feet before letting him sleep. A month of noise and excitement finally settled down. At this time, Felix could rest assured to prepare for the metropolitan examination next year. Since he became the top scholar, the play Falling Pear Blossoms, which was already old, was dragged out to be performed again. Every time, it was linked to the reputation of top scholar Gu. This not only raised many controversies, but the content also revolved around issues like female chastity. Fortunately, Felix didn't mind, only focusing on studying for the exam. Not long after, floods occurred in the south. Many refugees flocked to the capital. The government was too busy to handle it and had to call for help from the people. I responded to the call and started supporting refugee relief, especially for women with small children and young girls who were displaced. I helped them find temporary shelter so they wouldn't have to hide here and there. In these times, women still had to endure harsher conditions than men. Men, even as refugees, could openly sleep anywhere, while women always had to be vigilant. Closing their eyes meant fearing harm from villains. Fortunately, there were some noble ladies who understood this suffering and actively sought to help. One of them was the Marchioness Charlotte, famous for her benevolent heart, bringing many other noble ladies to support. As women, we were united in helping female refugees overcome difficulties. However, outside there were rumors that we didn't care about male refugees. But clearly, when I distributed relief goods, I didn't distinguish between men and women. I only prioritized helping female refugees, especially the vulnerable ones, to prevent them from being threatened or harmed. In these chaotic times, I only provided a temporary place for shelter. Yet, some people kept making noise, demanding fairness and insisting on accepting male refugees to live together. At this point, I was forced to use etiquette and shame to respond. I said, "In the past, you used to say that men and women living together damaged public morals. Before I was married, I encountered bandits and had to take shelter with a strange man for one night. At that time, you said I lost my purity and should hang myself. Because of that, my former fiancé's family broke off the engagement. If not for my husband being a responsible man, perhaps I would have turned into dust vanishing on a street corner. Now you call for equality of all living beings, demanding to accept male refugees in as well. So I want to ask, would that be considered losing chastity, becoming a decay of morality?" As soon as I finished speaking, the whole crowd was tongue-tied. Some said this situation had a cause and etiquette could be temporarily set aside, but others insisted that men and women were different and must be separated clearly. For a moment, the whole capital buzzed with endless discussion. Meanwhile, Felix had passed the metropolitan examination and was preparing to enter the palace examination. The emperor heard that he was the author of the play Falling Pear Blossoms and knew I was helping refugees outside, so he paid great attention to him. The palace examination results were not yet out when Helen, wanting to save face for the Wei family, and also wanting to show that she and I had deep sisterly affection, came to pretend to contribute. She brought a few dozen taels of silver along with hand-sewn clothes, dressed magnificently with gold hairpins all over her head and exquisitely embroidered shoes. But when those shoes stepped onto the muddy ground, her face turned pale with shock. Marchioness Charlotte smirked slightly. Indeed, the Wei family has a good daughter-in-law. Helen had just married and didn't know Marchioness Charlotte yet. Seeing the lady wearing simple coarse cloth clothes, she couldn't hide her confusion, her eyes revealing astonishment. I glanced at Marchioness Charlotte's appearance and assumed she was someone from a family down on their luck. Because of that, Helen couldn't restrain herself and spoke rudely. "Is it also the turn of a poor person like you to badmouth our Wei family?" Hearing this, Marchioness Charlotte was not angry but burst out laughing. "Your mother-in-law has to be cautious in front of me, yet you, as a daughter-in-law, are even fiercer than her." Helen knew she had misspoken and dared not argue back. She hurriedly left the silver and clothes, then turned and left without looking back. Just then, the persistent rain that had lasted for days finally stopped. The sky revealed a streak of brilliant golden light, illuminating the still, drenched land. Outside, the sounds of bustling people rang out. Marchioness Charlotte pulled me out to watch the excitement. It turned out the palace examination results were out, and Felix's name shone brightly in the second position. He had become the second-place scholar. The good news had just arrived when the Empress's decree also came immediately after. The Empress praised me as a virtuous, dignified person with noble character and awarded me a command token, allowing me to enter the palace to serve at any time. This was truly a great honor. I was moved, kneeling in the mud, kowtowing repeatedly in gratitude. Even the refugees behind me knelt in unison, kowtowing to congratulate them. The joy quickly spread back to the village. Lily and Nina hugged each other and cried uncontrollably. Since I left the village for the capital to provide relief, the two of them had stayed home to teach in my place. Now they had both become excellent female teachers. Marchioness Charlotte stood by my side, saying happily, "Surely it is because you dared to oppose those harsh ethics, ignoring prejudices about women's chastity, and even opening literacy classes and helping refugees, that you were favored by the Empress like this. Hurry, change your clothes and go into the palace to give thanks." Urged by her, I returned, bringing my mother-in-law along. My mother-in-law was so agitated she was clumsy, not knowing which foot to step with first. Entering the palace, the Empress carried a majestic demeanor. Every word and gesture exuded royal style, making anyone who saw her dare not be negligent. During the conversation, Her Majesty expressed great satisfaction knowing my mother-in-law always wholeheartedly supported me, even learning new things with me. The Empress praised ceaselessly, "The old madam is truly a person with both broad vision and high wisdom." The praise made my mother-in-law blush with emotion. The Empress turned to me and said gently, "Evelyn Lee, relying on your own ability, you not only resisted feudal prejudices but also dared to marry Felix. You opened literacy classes, helped refugees, demonstrating resilience and the unyielding spirit of a woman. Women of our great dynasty should be like you, unbowed, unbending, maintaining nobility without being bound by ethics. Women's chastity should not become something placed above life." These words were especially meaningful, because the Empress was also a remarried woman who had long ceased to value harsh ethics. Although she did not directly criticize conservative scholars, in her heart she always despised them. The audience became a very harmonious exchange, both sides satisfied. At that moment, the Emperor led the top 3 scholars in for an audience. Seeing me and the Empress standing together, the Empress smiled and said, "Go quickly and congratulate your husband." Amidst everyone's teasing, I finally walked up to Felix. First, I knelt to pay respects to the Emperor, then was helped up by Felix. He held my hand, proudly introducing me to the Emperor. "Your Majesty, this is the greatest motivation that made your subject give up laziness and start focusing on studying to achieve today's success." The Emperor looked at us, his eyes full of satisfaction, and stood with the Empress, laughing. "I hope that every couple in the world can be harmonious like you two. I also hope those conservatives can wake up soon. Women's chastity should not become a burden or a constraint beyond reason." Felix held my hand tightly, never letting go, his eyes full of love and determination. Later, when my father called us back, Felix had just returned from drinking with colleagues, a bit drunk. After washing up, he lay down next to me, resting his head lightly on my shoulder, a smile flickering on his face. He rubbed his head against my shoulder continuously. His appearance now was far different from the serious face usually seen outside. He laughed softly and said, "Father-in-law called you back simply because of your brother-in-law's affair. Henry's cousin on his mother's side committed a crime and has now been taken to the Supreme Court for detention. And I, currently at the Supreme Court, happen to be someone with a bit of a voice." He paused a little, then continued. "In the past, the play Falling Pear Blossoms, I wrote was loved by Her Majesty the Empress. On holidays, she often has people perform a play in the palace. Thanks to that preference, the movement of widows remarrying has now become popular. Men and women, even strangers, living together for various reasons are no longer considered violating ethics or losing chastity." He laughed, his eyes flashing with mockery. "The things your father-in-law caused in the past, along with the Wei family's noisy cancellation of the marriage, have now become the laughing stock of the capital. Even Henry's reputation, once considered solid as a bronze wall and iron rampart, has now shown a few cracks." However, he sighed, "that does not affect Henry's official career much. Nevertheless, he is currently still just a compiler at the Imperial Academy, while I am already a 6th rank official at the Supreme Court. Although only 1 rank higher, my reputation as an official is highly valued by the Emperor. I even received some familiarity from him." He smiled smugly. "Everyone knows that sooner or later I will have a great opportunity for promotion. Even your father-in-law, who used to look down on me like that, now has to give me some respect during holidays." But then he raised his eyebrows, looking triumphant. "As for me, every time I visit my father-in-law, I not only eat and drink my fill but also bring back a bunch of good things. The precious paintings by famous masters of the previous dynasty hanging in his study, I also unceremoniously took openly. After all, my father is very face-conscious. Felix claimed those paintings were gifts from father, so he couldn't deny it. But later, my father became wiser. Every time I visited, he probed to see if Felix was coming along. If he came, father immediately put away the valuables to avoid Hartach from losing them. This time I returned alone. Father straightened his back proudly and told me, "Tell Felix a word. The case of Victor Sue, if he can be spared, then spare him. Felix is now at the Supreme Court, and I hear he is about to be promoted. Sparing one person shouldn't be a difficult task. Victor Sue, relying on the Wei family's name, had committed heinous crimes. Abducting girls was a small matter, lending at usurious rates and driving a 14-year-old girl to suicide was the major crime. Her mother had hanged herself right in front of the Supreme Court gate, causing the emperor to be furious. Now Victor Shu was terrified and had to beg the Wei family for help, and the Wei family turned to my father. I took a slow sip of tea and replied indifferently, "I truly cannot speak on this matter. If father sees it as possible, just go to the Supreme Court yourself to find someone else. Felix is just a petty official. Above him are the chief minister and the vice minister. How can he simply decide to spare someone?" Hearing the indifferent refusal, my father angrily slammed the table. "Fine, you rebellious daughter. We all bear the surname Li. Blood is thicker than water. You and Helen are sisters. Do you feel gloated when she is in trouble?" I set down the teacup, looked up at father, and spoke calmly but sharply. "Father, are you talking about the sister who stole my original marriage and took away most of my dowry?" "Father, you are old, and the situation in the court is changing. Henry's father has been bedridden for a year, and Henry is too weak. You want to use this opportunity to gain favor with the Wei family to secure your position, don't you? Unfortunately, this matter cannot rely on me, and regarding Victor Zhu, the emperor already knows clearly. Do you really want Felix to risk his neck? Father, surely you can guess even the emperor's intentions. Why do you deliberately pretend to be blind and deaf?" After speaking, my father was so furious his hands trembled, muttering my name. He smashed the teacup onto the table, ceramic shards shattered and flew everywhere. I looked at him coldly and continued, "But now I am no longer the weak girl of the past. I have opened literacy classes and relieved refugees. My reputation among noble ladies is very good. Moreover, I have the command token granted by the Empress, allowing me to enter the palace at will. Compared to officials like father, apart from court audiences, it is difficult to meet the Empress a few times a year. Father wants to hit me. Then I will bring this face full of injuries into the palace to see the Empress. If the Empress asks, I will report the whole truth to see who ultimately loses more face." My father was so angry he could only shout curses, but I didn't bother looking back, knowing that behind the screen, maids would take care of him. At most, father would only faint for a moment from anger. I led Lily out the door with a proud posture. Lily was now plumper than before but still afraid of my father, so her walk was somewhat awkward and unnatural. Lily walked with a limp, her face showing some worry, speaking timidly. "Miss, we made the master so angry, will it cause him to fall ill?" I patted her hand lightly, laughing faintly. "Oh silly girl, your miss is no longer the person of the past. Even if I don't have enough strength to deal with it, isn't there your young master Felix there to shoulder it? I at most only make father angry enough to faint, but if your brother-in-law takes action, I fear father might be bedridden for a few days." Lily shrank back, sticking out her tongue in fear. "Miss, don't say that anymore. I'm afraid if the son-in-law really comes, he will cause a riot. Just seeing the son-in-law, the master's face is already scary enough." The two of us covered our mouths and giggled, feeling not a bit of guilt for having just angered my father. As we walked near the exit of the inner courtyard, we ran into Simon rushing over. Simon was 15 this year, taller than before, his body robust, but his face looked haggard and lethargic. He ran without looking and crashed into me, then shouted loudly. Lily immediately blocked in front of me, bowing her head and whispering, "Young master, please be careful with your words." Simon was like Helen, always the type to look down on others. He didn't care who I was, and certainly didn't respect a limping maid like Lily. He shoved Lily hard, shouting arrogantly, "This is the Li residence, what I say rules. Anyone must obediently give way. This house bears the surname Lim, not Gu." I pulled Lily back, signaling her not to argue with someone like Simon. He was Madame Yan's only son, spoiled excessively since childhood. In his courtyard, who knew how many beautiful maids there were? I heard a few months ago, he insulted a maid in my father's courtyard, causing her to jump into the lake to commit suicide in desperation. Because of this, He was beaten severely by my father, but looking at his arrogant appearance today, clearly, there was no correction at all. Lily and I could only stand from afar watching his arrogant back disappear, feeling disgusted in our hearts. Lily muttered, sighing, "Truly cannot compare to a single strand of hair of the son-in-law." Since being saved by Felix, Lily regarded him as a deity, always serving him wholeheartedly, not only protecting him but also not hesitating to push me aside. I could only watch helplessly as she fussed over caring for him in every detail. Lily often said, "This servant doesn't hope for much later, I just need to find a husband with half the responsibility of the son-in-law and that will be enough." Hearing that, Felix laughed and said behind my back, "Lily, you are mistaken. I don't want you to find a husband who imitates me all day, carrying your family's chickens home for himself." Lily and I had just reached the main gate when there was a commotion inside. A small servant rushed out, shouting, "Take the master's command token. Quickly invite the imperial physician." Hearing that, my heart tightened. After all, he was my father. I couldn't help but ask clearly. The small servant gasped, "Miss, just now the young master returned and said a few words to the master." The master suddenly clutched his chest and coughed up blood. "Now he has fainted. The madam is worried and urged us to invite the imperial physician." Hearing that father was in trouble, my heart ached. Although father often made me angry, I would rather he slammed the table and scolded than be angry to the point of coughing up blood. When Lily and I hurriedly returned, we saw Simon kneeling in the middle of the courtyard. On his cheeks were two bright red handprints, one on the left, one on the right. Madame Yan was crying and scolding. "What kind of thing did I give birth to? Why cause such a big disaster? Do you not want to live anymore?" Simon argued back, his voice choking. "The Chu family and the Wu family are both fine. Why is it only me who gets in trouble?" Madame Yan angrily slapped him 2 more times, clutching her chest and screaming. "The Chu family are relatives of the princess's household, the Wu family are relatives of the emperor's uncle. Can you compare with them? Even if your father is the vice minister of rights, how does he have enough power to save you? The person you and those two humiliated was the biological younger sister of the princess of Rongyang. Simon, are you crazy? How dare you join them in doing such a heinous thing? I am truly miserable to have given birth to a wicked spawn like you." She finished speaking and sat on the ground, crying bitterly, holding her face. Hearing these words, I couldn't help but be stunned, my mouth agape, unable to utter a word. If Madame Yan's words were true, then Simon would become the scapegoat pushed out by the other two families. The Li family had only one male heir, him, and clearly, my father no longer had the strength to father another son. Therefore, upon hearing this news, he immediately became so angry he vomited blood. Adding the harsh words I had just said made him unable to bear it and fall ill. When the imperial physician arrived to check my father's pulse, he said, "The master suffered a stroke due to surging blood pressure. Even if he wakes up, I fear half his body will be paralyzed." Hearing this, Madame Yan cried even more violently, her eyes swollen, tears streaming down. She screamed, telling Simon to run as far as possible. But the person coming to arrest Simon was Felix. I didn't feel any heartache or fear when Simon was arrested, only pity for the princess of Rongyang's poor sister. Sure enough, Felix, with a serious face, told me. The princess's sister hanged herself. When they returned, the body was being taken to the Supreme Court. The other two families have also been arrested. The emperor was furious, even the princess kneeling at the door begging for mercy was useless. The emperor's uncle didn't even speak up, handing the entire handling over to the Supreme Court without a word of plea. He continued. Although the princess's sister lived a somewhat loose life, intimate with this noble son today, close to that master tomorrow, that is not a reason for those three to ruin her. The princess of Rongyang cried until she almost fainted, constantly saying she wanted the prince of Rongyang to demand justice for her. The prince of Rongyang presented a petition to the emperor. Hearing it, the emperor immediately assigned the Supreme Court to judge, leaving no one out. The other two families have been arrested, now only Simon remains. Felix, wearing his official uniform, formally came to make the arrest. Madame Yan cried and blocked the way, begging, "Virtuous son-in-law, I was wrong. I shouldn't have kept Evelyn's dowry. I will return it all to you children. Please, son-in-law, open your heart of mercy and spare my only son. Please." Madame Yan knelt and kowtowed continuously, making loud thumping sounds. Felix ordered a maid to help her up, speaking coldly. "The law does not tolerate favor. Simon has committed a crime. I must take him back for trial. If he has evidence proving his innocence, I absolutely will not touch a hair on his head. Please rest assured. Simon only now knew fear, sprawling on the ground crying miserably. Mother. Father. Save me. Elder sister, brother-in-law, save me. At this moment, he called me elder sister and called Felix brother-in-law. Before, every time I returned, he only cared about flattering Henry and Helen, never regarding Felix and me as anything. Seeing the situation was irretrievable, Madame Yan fainted from anger. I stood aside watching the chaotic scene, feeling absolutely no sympathy in my heart. This was the son they cherished like a treasure for half their lives. If not for Simon, with Madame Yan's background, how could she have become my father's successor wife? It was this son who made Madame Yan harbor schemes, convincing my father to marry me to Henry, stealing the dowry my mother left for me. All her pride relied on this son. But now, the son she had been proud of for so many years dared to do such a heinous thing, forcing her to kneel on the ground, tears streaming, begging hopelessly. I didn't feel gloating, only a heavy heart with a vague sadness. Looking at the Yan clan, from a mere concubine raised to legal wife, how many people behind their backs marveled and praised her as skillful and talented. Right under the eyes of the legal wife, she not only gave birth to a son and a daughter but also rose from a lowly status to become the main wife. At that time, my father's reputation was resounding. Everyone praised Madame Yan like a phoenix rising to a high branch. My house at that time, not to mention welcome to Raccoon Tale. I hope you enjoy your time here and find peace in the stories we tell. If you liked the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. Henry Y and I had been engaged for 10 full years. Yet, due to an unexpected incident, I was forced to hide in a desolate temple all night long with a poor scholar named Felix Gu. The very next day, the Wei family came to call off the engagement, and rumors spread everywhere that I had lost my purity. On the day the Wei family officially came to cancel the marriage, my father, in a fit of rage, delivered a stinging slap that left me dizzy, blood trickling from the corner of my mouth. He shouted, "You unfilial child, why didn't you just die out there?" My stepmother, Madame Joyce Yen, pretended to comfort my father saying, "Master, please calm down." The eldest miss only wanted to avoid disaster, who could have known she would encounter bandits. But my father remained unappeased. He screamed, "You rebellious daughter. The reputation of my Li family has been stained by someone like you. Men, bring the white silk here. I want to strangle her with my own hands to rectify the family honor." I could only cover my face, tears falling ceaselessly. Since my biological mother passed away, father had elevated her cousin, who was a mere concubine, to the position of legal wife. If my mother had not arranged the marriage with the Wei family while she was alive, I fear my life would have been tormented beyond imagination. The Wei family was a clan favored by the emperor. Ever since Henry's grandfather achieved great merit under the former emperor and sacrificed himself for the country, the clan had risen powerfully. Now, Henry's father held a key position in the court, and Henry himself was truly a dragon among men. At 20, he became the second-place scholar. Although currently only a compiler at the Imperial Academy, everyone knew his future was incredibly bright. Clearly, in just a few months, Henry and I were to be married. However, at that critical moment, when a band of bandits descended from the mountain, I had to flee into a desolate temple to hide for the night. Unexpectedly, before I arrived, a poor scholar named Felix was already inside. Initially, he only intended to rest a little, but due to exhaustion, he had fallen asleep. When I woke up, I realized that in the abandoned temple, there was not only myself and my maid, Lily, but also another person. We hid until dawn, listening to the bandits cheering all night, and only dared to return home after they had returned to the mountain. Felix protected us throughout the night. He held an old lamp stand found in the temple and comforted me, saying, "Do not be afraid, I have this. Even if I cannot stab them to death, I can at least knock them unconscious. You ladies need not worry." His voice sounded light, but I knew he had no certainty. Fortunately, the bandits only stole chickens, ducks, geese, dogs, and some grain from the villagers below the mountain, then retreated in satisfaction. Fearing that Lily and I, being weak females, might encounter mishaps, Felix decided to escort us all the way home. I was trembling, having not slept a wink all night. Hungry and exhausted, my steps unsteady, relying entirely on Lily for support. Lily asked anxiously, "Miss, the carriage and the driver have fled. What shall we do?" I forced a smile to reassure her. "It is fine. We just avoided bandits for one night, it is not a big deal. Father will not blame us." My words were truly naive. Unexpectedly, when the driver returned, he loudly recounted that he and I had become separated. This story quickly spread to the Wei family. The next morning, as soon as I stepped through the door, the Wei family immediately sent people to break off the engagement. The leader was the wet nurse who had watched me grow up, but now her smile was full of distance. She said, "My master understands that the Wei family has always valued etiquette. Daughters of the house never spend the night on the road. The eldest Mrs. situation is truly unfortunate and hard to explain. Our two families are in-laws and do not wish to make things difficult, but we heard a man followed the eldest miss. Such a thing is unacceptable." My father suppressed his anger and reluctantly accepted the Wei family's withdrawal. I hurriedly explained. "Father, the bandits came suddenly." The driver panicked, threw Lily and me off the carriage, and ran away. We had no choice but to find a desolate temple to hide. But my father refused to listen. He immediately raised his hand and slapped me hard, cutting off my explanation. His face was twisted, devoid of his usual kindness. He dragged me into the room and strictly confined me, forbidding me to take half a step outside. He ordered, "Drag Lily out and beat her to death to settle this." Hearing this, Lily knelt in terror, her face pale, kowtowing and begging, "Please, master, spare my life. I can testify that the eldest miss absolutely did nothing to harm the reputation of the Li family, nor did she disrespect the Wei family." Her words were not even finished before she was dragged away. I hugged Lily's legs tightly and screamed, "Father, if you want to beat Lily to death, you might as well kill me first." Lily, tears streaming down her face, choked out through her sobs, "Miss, having these words from you." My father looked on coldly, unmoved. My stepmother, Madame Joyce Yan, advised, "Master, making a scene is worse than keeping it quiet. The eldest miss did not damage our honor, why make such a big fuss?" Her words seemed to remind my father of something. Furiously, he grabbed a teacup from the table and smashed it directly onto Lily's head. She fell unconscious on the spot. Not long after, servants brought a white silk cloth. Madame Yan immediately stepped aside, her eyes shifty. My father said coldly, "Today I must personally rectify the Li family rules." As soon as he finished speaking, the white silk was wrapped around my neck. I struggled to escape, but my father pulled tighter. My breath grew weaker, and I thought I would not survive. Just then, there was a commotion outside. A loud shout rang out, "Master, bad news. A poor scholar named Felix has suddenly barged in." Holding a brick in his hand, he rushed forward, striking anyone he met, looking reckless as if he did not care for his life. The servants and guards, wary of his status as a scholar, dared not fight him to the death. As a result, he knocked quite a few of them unconscious. Felix rushed straight in and snatched me from my father's hands. I coughed violently, my throat burning and hoarse, only able to lean weakly against his chest, gasping for air. Seeing me in this state, my father became even more furious and immediately ordered, "Drag both my daughter and Felix out and beat them to death." Unexpectedly, Felix stood up straight and spoke coldly. "Master Arthur Li, you are the Vice Minister of Rights. Do you not know that I, Felix, although just a poor scholar, still hold the title of a licentiate? Do you think killing me will have no consequences?" He continued, his voice challenging. "I forgot to mention, before coming here, I told my classmates that if I did not return after a day and a night, they should immediately beat the drums to report to the imperial court. Consider this, we are all learned men, why must we resort to violence?" Hearing this, my father realized that Felix was not someone easy to deal with. Although he was just a small scholar, the law clearly stated that killing a scholar was more troublesome than killing a commoner. Serious cases could even lead to imprisonment. My father had to suppress his anger. Madame Yan, standing aside, pretended to advise, "Master, calm down. Our eldest miss surely has no private affair with an outsider." Felix sneered, "Madam, no need to pretend to be kind. If you have something to say, say it directly. Why add fuel to the fire?" Madame Yan choked on his words. As a woman, she could not argue with a man in front of others, so she sat aside resentfully, her face full of displeasure. Felix spoke clearly. "If Master Li believes the eldest miss has lost her reputation, and you can arbitrarily kill her or marry her off to someone else, then let me take responsibility. After all, this started with me. Eldest miss, although I am currently poor, I will try my best to marry you. If you do not despise me, let us choose a good day to get married. I have an elderly mother at home whose health is still good. Although I am just a scholar, who knows, I might become a provincial graduate in the future." His gentle words made me smile involuntarily. Compared to the heartlessness of the Wei family, Felix, though blameless, showed far more courage and responsibility. Although I had no feelings for him, I nodded frankly. if you do not despise me as someone who has been rejected." The smile on Felix's face became even more radiant. My father, Master Lai, looked even worse upon seeing this. Felix laughed softly, his tone calm but sarcastic. "Oh, that is not right, father-in-law. Marrying her to someone else is not as good as marrying her to me. What do you think?" My father was cornered and finally had to agree to the marriage with Felix. Although my father had 100 ways to force him to leave, against Felix's stubborn and shameless character, all efforts were futile. Felix bluntly threatened, "If I am driven away, I will tell everyone that Master Li forced his own daughter to death." My father, who valued face more than anything, had to choose the solution of marrying me to Felix. He immediately reduced the dowry originally prepared for my marriage to the Wei family, he said. "The Wei family did not blame us. We decided to switch brides and marry your sister, Helen Li, into their family. The Wei family is prestigious, while you are only marrying a poor scholar. Bringing a large dowry would be a waste. It is better to leave most of it for your sister." His words sounded reasonable, but the truth was clear: it was all for my sister. My heart felt like it had a large wound, cold winds blowing through it. I could no longer hold back and retorted, "Father, there is no need to pretend. The dowry was left by my mother. When Madame Yan was a concubine, she could not even support herself, let alone compete. Now that she is the legal wife, she covets my dowry. Is it because she knows I have no one to rely on?" My father, his intentions exposed, shouted in embarrassment, "Evelyn Li, that is your stepmother and sister. How can you say such things?" I smiled faintly, bitterness in my heart. My biological mother's spirit tablet is still in the Li family ancestral hall. As for my sister, if father lets her acknowledge my mother as her mother and call Madame Yan auntie, then I am willing to give up half the dowry. My father naturally did not accept my request. A few days later, I heard the warehouse caught fire, damaging many items. Tired of his tricks, I wrote a letter asking Felix for help. Since Lily was beaten to death in my father's eyes, I had no one to trust, so I had to hide silver and fake a love letter to send the message out. Not long after, Felix boldly came to the house, declaring he wanted to see the dowry list. My father was furious, but Felix calmly replied, "Father-in-law, you know my family is poor. Do we not rely on my wife's dowry to live? I must check beforehand to avoid any shortages." Using that opportunity, I escaped confinement. When viewing the dowry list, I discovered many missing items. I pointed them out one by one, making my father's face darken. But I was not afraid and continued listing every deficiency. My father must have wanted to kill me right there. But I did not give him the chance. I said calmly, "Father, I do not demand the items back. Just convert them into silver and pay me. My husband's family is poor. We would rather hold silver than receive those objects. For the missing items, convert them to silver at market price." Felix and I smiled at each other, feeling no shame in our poverty. Felix extended his hand toward my father and said half-jokingly, "Father-in-law, you do not want me to talk nonsense outside, do you? The young Mrs.'s reputation is important. But if people know a father swallowed his daughter's dowry, that would be much worse." Gritting his teeth, my father finally had to go to the accounting room and retrieve 2,000 silver taels to give to me. The betrothal